Good morning. Welcome to the Point. This past week, Governor Gretchen Whitmer delivered her first State of the State address. She talked about roads, clean drinking water, education, all things we'd heard in the campaign. Near the end of the speech, she talked about working together. She also poked a little fun at Republican leadership for sitting on their hands for most of the speech, and she came to the topic of this week's program. That's auto no-fault insurance.
The policies that I have outlined tonight will strengthen Michigan's foundation for our economic future. Next month, I will present a budget, and my budget will offer a real solution for fixing our roads and rebuilding our infrastructure. It will give frontline educators the tools they need to address the literacy crisis. And most of all, it will reflect my unwavering commitment to making Michigan the home for opportunity. The people of Michigan voted for people they believed could solve problems. There are legislative districts in our state that I won by double digits, and voters also elected Republicans to represent them. Let's prove to them, let's prove to the country that divided government doesn't have to mean gridlock. I am eager to engage with any and all people of good faith about ideas and priorities, including your ideas on bringing down car insurance rates. Well, I finally got you up. I finally got these guys on their feet. But I want to be very clear as we talk about where we are headed. I'm committed to this state and to solving problems. But I want you to know I'm going to reject anything presented as a solution that doesn't actually solve the problem or creates a new one.
Auto no-fault insurance. For decades here in Michigan, we've talked about doing something to amend, change, somehow bring down the rates, but nothing's ever happened. Now there's a new push to do something about auto no-fault insurance rates, at least, and there are two separate committees, one in the Senate, one in the House. We start with the person chairing up that committee over in the Senate, Senator Aric Nesbitt. For our purposes today, we're going to be talking about auto no-fault insurance because the governor mentioned it briefly in her State of the State, but it's a subject that we've been talking about here in Lansing and in this state for decades. So I talked to one of your colleagues on the other side of the Capitol building, Representative Sabo, who's on the group that's working over in the House. I know they've met at least once. Your group has met a couple of times over here as you prepare. How do you start this conversation? How do you get the shareholders involved, or do you, and the stakeholders, and where do you try to go?
Yeah, this is about the drivers here in Michigan. They're paying the most expensive auto insurance in the nation. We're twice the amount of the national average. We're paying more than anybody else in the state. And the amazing thing is you go to Ohio, they're the number 50th state in the nation. They pay the lowest rates. So it's not our weather, it's not our special climate, it's not our industrial pass. It's the fact that we have auto insurance from the early 70s that hasn't been drastically reformed. In the 1970s, they passed auto no-fault. And this was to provide unlimited lifetime benefits, to cut down, there's too many lawsuits that was going on. We needed to cut the cost of auto insurance, so they said this was a way to do it. And now, 40-some years later, we know that the system they created in the 70s is not working for us in 2019. And so as I look into this and dive into it, as the Senate Majority Leader, Mike Shirkey asked me to take up this effort to drive down the cost of auto insurance. It's not about reform, it's about actually making it more affordable for the drivers here in Michigan. And that's something that we're starting to work on here. The insurance committee I'm on, we've met twice, and I'm in the listening and learning tour right now. And then we're going to work into that putting the pen to the paper and then actually delivering the real reforms that'll drive down the cost of auto insurance.
Okay, so now I start to play my role as devil's advocate. In the 1970s, Michigan was not alone. There were a lot of states that went up to auto no-fault and implemented similar, not as generous, but similar packages. Many of them have changed their practices over the period of time. So we may be a little behind the curve
quite a bit
when
behind.
It comes to that. But first, devil's advocate question. people don't often complain about their coverage when you talk about lifetime medical benefits for catastrophic care and that type of thing, but they do complain about the cost. So are we talking about changing the benefits package coverage or the system entirely?
It takes a lot of different points in terms of be able to change the system and drive down the cost. The unique thing about Michigan is what you addressed, is that all the other states, just like you probably have a health insurance plan and my dad's on Medicare, or other folks have a Priority Health or Blue Cross plan or on VA, that in every other state that the main provider of health care is the health insurance that you purchase. Here in Michigan, just because you happen to be in a car, it's covered under that. So what do people are able to change? Their collision coverage, whether or not they're able to have collision, or they lower that as much as possible so they can actually afford the one-size-fit-all Cadillac plan that we have on the health side. But what's the most likely thing that a poor person or somebody on a fixed income is going to happen? They're going to get in a car crash and their $10,000 car is totaled and they don't have the cost to replace that. So they go out and they try to buy another $7,000 car. Well, they already have the $10,000 loan that's out there because they didn't have the coverage to begin with, because that person on the fixed income or the poor person, and this is driving people to bankruptcy because they're not able to adjust the insurance. This is the only product that we have, insurance product where we don't have a choice in terms of I'm expecting my firstborn in May. My wife and I, we're expecting in May, and I'm going through the term life insurance plan. What can we afford in terms of part of our budget? What does make sense to make sure that our new child's taken care of if something happens? We don't just go out and get a unlimited plan. We go out and say what fits and what makes sense to make sure our child's taken care of. Same thing with your whether it's life insurance, your health insurance, what's the deductible, what's the area, so you can change things. Your house insurance, is it replacement cost? Back on the farm, are we going to insure that outbuilding or not? Well, the cost to insure that isn't. You have that choice, and whenever you empower individuals to provide that choice, you actually provide them with the incentives of purchasing insurance that fits the level that they're able to pay, and also provides them with the level of coverage that makes sense to them. And so this is a one-size-fits-all central planning area. And so I'm open to discussing with anybody anywhere and driving down the cost of insurance, but our system here in Michigan is not working for the citizens of Michigan. When you have over 20% of drivers, 1 in 5 drivers in the state that are driving without auto insurance, you know something's wrong.
Senator Ananick was on this show last week. We talked about a lot of things, but it always comes up, auto no-fault insurance. And he said his interest would be only if you could get those costs driven down. He didn't care a great deal about the health care providers or about the attorneys or about the insurance companies. He wasn't as interested in that component as he was about driving down costs. And my question to him...
Is that why he's voted against every plan that actually drove down costs in the past? I mean, people can talk a lot, but this is about actually defending the drivers here in Michigan in terms of the cost of auto insurance.
I tell you that story to get to this point, and he said, when asked, I said, well, how do you know, even if you make reforms, how can you be sure that you drive down the cost to the consumer? Yep. And he said he was willing to have regulators take a look and keep those prices down. How would you do it? How would you guarantee that if you make changes, the rates actually go down? Yeah. How do you force that to happen?
We're the most expensive state in the nation. We have a one-of-a-kind auto insurance laws in the nation. Competition drives costs down. That competition provides more people entering the market and more choices within the market to make sure that people are able to purchase insurance. Then there's the other side, is that the cost on the healthcare side. We just had testimony earlier this week in committee talking about how when you happen to be in an auto accident, you're paying 5 times, 10 times as much as if your private pay is paying. And so there's no cost controls on the other side, which then makes it ripe for fraud and abuse in the system. And so as you look at other states, and every state in the nation has lower cost of auto insurance than Michigan does, by naturally making reforms and making us like other states, you're going to drive down the cost. The last state to do it was New Jersey in the early 90s. And their costs are dramatically lower than ours. Actually, when they get in an auto accident and happen to, and it involves a medical issue, the costs there are half as much as they are in Michigan. Is it because the auto accidents are that much worse here in Michigan? Or is there system costs in the system that need to be driven out? And that's something where we need to be very serious about that. As I went door to door last year, the number one issue that I heard day after day was that auto insurance is becoming unaffordable. I've talked to auto insurance agents who've given prices to families, to single mothers, and given them what the price is for a 6-month policy, and they cry. They're brought to tears trying to say, do I make sure that we're insured when we're in our car? Or do I have money for food or groceries or actually being able to get to work? These are serious issues that you're driving the poor in Michigan. You're essentially criminalizing the poor and adding a senior tax. When you turn 65 and get on Medicare, I was changing the oil at the local Express Lube in Paw Paw the other week, and one of the managers came out and started yelling. He had turned 65. His premiums went up $1,800 because we're the only state in the nation where they don't coordinate care with Medicare. Only state in the nation. And because of that, seniors are paying an extra tax on their auto insurance, and that is wrong. The poor are being driven out from being able to insure what's likely one of their most valuable assets, their vehicle, and that's driving them to bankruptcy. And this should be a concern to all of us in making sure that we provide more freedom, more choice, drive down to those costs so more people are actually able to insure the assets that matter.
I got 1,000 questions, 45 seconds, so
Okay.
Here's what I'm going to ask. Because you started down this road, is one of the things you would look at, obviously, at coordinating services from your last response, but would you also be looking at a fee schedule for services provided in any type of fix that you get?
Yeah, everything's on the table, and it's something where, as we look at the cost of today with auto insurance, the average cost on the healthcare part makes up about 45% of that premium. 45 years ago when it was first enacted, it made up about 7% of that premium. And so the costs have just skyrocketed, and we really need to get a containment on these costs. I don't care what special interest I make upset. This is about the folks and the families back at home trying to put food on their table, and the biggest thing we can do to make their pocketbooks bigger and a little more money that they're able to take home is by lowering the cost of auto insurance here in Michigan.
That's the view from Republicans in the Senate.